Welcome to World Business Report. I'm Sharanjit Lail in Singapore. Swine flu is dominating sentiment on the markets after the World Health Organization raised its pandemic alert level for its outbreak. There are worries that the flu outbreak will slow the recovery in the global economy. Airline and tourism stocks have been hit, but pharmaceutical shares have been gaining as demand for anti-flu vaccines rise. And that's offset some of the losses on the Asian markets, even as shares on Wall Street fell on Monday. Professor Patrick McNutt of the Manchester Business School says the swine flu may well be hitting investor sentiment in the West, but that Asia is better equipped to deal with it following the SARS outbreak 6 years ago.
Well, I think that the first thing that it will do is it'll impact on the imports, particularly on the agricultural side, and that will then slow down trade. And at a time when exports are being constrained, then the impact on of the swine flu would impact on imports.
Now, you're talking of imports there. Let's take a look at pork imports because, this news has already prompted the likes of China and a lot of Eastern European countries to ban imports of pork from the US and Mexico, for instance. That's even though the WHO has essentially said there's no chance of contracting swine flu through eating the meat. So is this raising the prospect the disease will mean there's going to be more of a protectionist blow on the global economy?
It could, but I think that China is a big importer of pork, but also remember, since the SARS epidemic, China does not want to see such an epidemic repeat itself. So they've been more cautious, and they're trying to minimize their risk. So I think China's response is the correct response at this time, to wait and see, and then observe how this pandemic pans out over time.
But is there a risk that perhaps it's all sort of being overhyped and people are getting worried for nothing?
There probably is that as well, but we've learned from the SARS epidemic that we cannot take any risk, that this must be stopped and stopped right now. And I think that some of the measures that are in place are very necessary, because at a time when we're looking at a continuation of this world recession for another quarter or two, the last thing we want is to have an impact that will impact on agricultural products, and particularly on the pork.
Right. You mentioned SARS, obviously not a distant memory here in Asia, Singapore as well, just 6 years ago. How did markets react then, and what can we expect now?
Well, then the reaction was very much a negative impact, and it impacted significantly on the supply chain of many big suppliers that depended on Asian OEMs, that is the equipment manufacturers, to manufacture products. So the supply chain was constrained. And because of that, we found delays in the supply chain, we found prices changing, and we also found a small restriction in international trade. Now, that was SARS, that was a serious epidemic. It was well contained, so we cannot see that repeat itself at this point in time. So the lessons from SARS are well balanced, and I think that they will influence significantly the reaction that we're seeing here now in Asia.
Patrick McNutt from the Manchester Business School.